You've been emptying yourself into people who were never meant to be filled by you, pouring everything you are into relationships that treat your love like a resource to be extracted rather than a gift to be cherished. And somewhere along the way, you convinced yourself this was normal. This was what love looks like. This exhausting dance of giving and giving and giving until there's nothing left of you except the role you play in someone else's life, the function you serve in their story, the need you meet that keeps them comfortable while you disappear piece by piece into the service of keeping them whole. You learned that love is supposed to hurt, that if it's not costing you something fundamental, if you're not sacrificing your needs and your boundaries and your very sense of self, then it's not real love, it's not deep love, it's not the kind of love that proves you're worthy. And so you've spent years, maybe decades, offering up your identity on the altar of relationships that were never going to give you back even a fraction of what you gave. Relationships where your value was measured by how much you could endure, how much you could tolerate, how completely you could erase yourself to make room for someone who never learned to make room for you. You say yes when you mean no because saying no feels like withdrawing love. You apologize for things that aren't your fault because keeping peace feels more important than being right. You ignore red flags because you've been taught that real love means accepting people exactly as they are, even when who they are is someone who hurts you, disrespects you, takes you for granted while you're busy convincing yourself that your patience will eventually be rewarded, that your unconditional acceptance will eventually inspire them to change, that if you just love them hard enough, sacrifice enough, disappear enough, they'll finally see your worth and give you back the love you've been dying for. You stay in relationships long past their expiration date because leaving feels like failure, like admitting you weren't strong enough, patient enough, loving enough to make it work, and you'd rather exhaust yourself trying to save something that was never meant to survive than face the possibility that you wasted years on someone who was never going to choose you the way you chose them. You feel guilty when you prioritize yourself, selfish when you have needs, demanding when you ask for basic respect, too much when you want attention, not enough when you can't meet their every expectation. And you've learned to make yourself smaller, quieter, more convenient, more flexible, more understanding, more forgiving, more everything except the one thing you actually need to be, which is valued, seen, chosen, loved, without having to earn it through constant self-sacrifice and the systematic erasure of everything that makes you you. You're exhausted from monitoring their moods, managing their emotions, anticipating their needs, adjusting your behavior to keep them comfortable while nobody's asking what you need. What would make you comfortable? What would help you feel safe and seen and genuinely cared for, instead of just useful? You've become an expert at reading rooms, at sensing shifts in energy, at knowing exactly what version of yourself to perform to keep the relationship stable, to prevent conflict, to avoid the withdrawal of affection that you've learned comes whenever you dare to be inconvenient, to have needs, to suggest that maybe love should be reciprocal, that maybe care should flow both directions, that maybe you shouldn't have to disappear completely to make space for someone else's entire existence. You don't even know who you are anymore outside of what you do for others, what you provide, what role you fill, because your identity got swallowed so gradually by the relationships you poured yourself into that you didn't notice you were disappearing until you looked in the mirror one day and couldn't recognize the person staring back. The one who used to have dreams and boundaries and a sense of self that wasn't completely defined by how well they served someone else's needs. Here's where this started, and understanding this won't erase the pattern immediately, but it might help you stop blaming yourself for a survival strategy you developed when you were too young to know you were developing it. You learned as a child that love was conditional, that belonging required performance, that being wanted meant being useful, and whether it was a parent who only showed affection when you achieved something, or a caregiver who was emotionally unavailable unless you were taking care of them, or a household where peace depended on you being invisible, adaptable, never a burden you absorbed, the lesson that your worth was transactional, that love wasn't something you deserved by simply existing, but something you had to earn through constant giving, through making yourself indispensable, through proving over and over that you were worth keeping around by demonstrating how much you could tolerate, how little you required, how completely you could prioritize someone else's well-being over your own. And that child who learned to equate love with self-erasure, who discovered that the way to be safe was to be useful, who found that affection came more readily when they had no needs of their own. That child grew up and started choosing partners who recreated that exact dynamic, who needed someone to give endlessly and take rarely, who wanted a relationship where one person does all the emotional labor, while the other just receives, who were looking for someone already trained to disappear into the background of someone else's life. And you attracted them because you were perfect for them. You'd been preparing for this role your entire childhood, practicing the art of self-abandonment disguised as love, perfecting the skill of prioritizing others while calling it devotion, when really it was just the survival mechanism of a kid who learned early that mattering wasn't a birthright, but a privilege you had to earn through constant sacrifice. And here's the brutal truth that's going to cut through every justification you've been using to stay in relationships that are killing you slowly. You're not loving them by disappearing. You're enabling them to never develop the capacity for reciprocal care. You're not being selfless. You're teaching them that your needs don't matter. You're not demonstrating patience. You're showing them that you'll tolerate anything, which means they never have to change, never have to grow, never have to learn how to love someone without consuming them because you keep making it so easy. Keep absorbing all the discomfort. Keep shouldering all the emotional weight while they float through the relationship, taking everything you offer and wondering why you're so tired, why you're so needy, why you can't just be happy with the crumbs they're willing to give when you've been serving them a feast prepared from your own flesh. You think if you just love them better, they'll learn to love you back properly. But here's what actually happens. The more you tolerate, the more they expect you to tolerate. The more you give, the more they feel entitled to take, the more you disappear. The less they see you because people don't value what costs them nothing, don't cherish what requires no effort, don't respect what never demands respect, and you've been so busy proving your worth through sacrifice that you forgot to notice whether they're proving theirs, whether they're choosing you as intentionally as you're choosing them, whether they'd stay if you stopped performing perfect love and started requiring mutual love, whether they actually love you or just love what you do for them, love how you make them feel. Love the version of themselves they get to be when you're busy making sure they never have to face discomfort or take responsibility, or consider that maybe relationships require effort from both people, not just the one desperate to earn belonging. So here's what changes. Here's what breaks this pattern that's been destroying you since childhood. And it's simple in concept, but devastating in practice because it requires you to risk the exact thing you've been terrified of your entire life. You start showing up as yourself, messy and needy and imperfect. You start having boundaries even when boundaries make people uncomfortable. You start saying no without apologizing. You start asking for what you need without feeling like you have to earn the right to need anything. You start letting people see you on your bad days instead of performing perpetual okayness. And you watch carefully, honestly, brutally, to see who stays, who adjusts, who rises to meet you, and who disappears the moment you stop disappearing for them. Who gets angry that you're suddenly taking up space, who punishes you for having needs, who treats your boundaries like betrayal. And those people, the ones who can't love you when you're not sacrificing yourself, those are the people you finally, courageously, devastatingly learn to release because you're finally understanding that it was never love if it required your disappearance. It was never healthy if it demanded your silence. It was never real if it couldn't handle your wholeness. Start practicing micro moments of self-preservation. Start noticing when you're about to say yes but want to say no, and choose yourself just once, just this time, just to see what happens when you prioritize your own comfort over someone else's convenience, and notice who responds with understanding and who responds with punishment, who says, "Okay, I respect that," and who says, "You're being selfish," because that response tells you everything you need to know about whether they love you or just love what you do for them. Start asking for small things, basic things, reasonable things that any healthy relationship should easily accommodate, and watch what happens. Watch if they adjust or get defensive, if they meet you or make you feel guilty for wanting reciprocity, if they rise to the occasion or tell you you're asking too much when really you're just asking for the bare minimum of mutual care. You learned that loving means giving yourself until you disappear. But here's what you're learning now. What you're finally ready to understand, even though it's terrifying. Love that requires your disappearance is not love. It's consumption. It's extraction. It's someone using your inability to value yourself as permission to not value you either. And you don't owe anyone your wholeness as payment for their conditional affection. You don't have to earn belonging through sacrifice. You don't have to prove your worth by demonstrating how much you can endure, because real love, healthy love, reciprocal love doesn't ask you to disappear. It asks you to show up fully, completely, exactly as you are, with needs and boundaries and rough edges and bad days, and it meets you there. It gives back. It considers you. It makes space. It chooses you on purpose, not just accepts you because you're useful. And learning to require that, to demand that, to refuse anything less than that, that's how you stop repeating the pattern. That's how you break the cycle. That's how you finally learn that love shouldn't hurt, shouldn't cost you your identity, shouldn't require you to become a ghost in your own life. And if it does, it was never love to begin with. It was just another person who taught you what you learned as a child. That to be wanted, you have to disappear. When the truth you're finally ready to accept is that to be truly loved, you have to be fully, terrifyingly, unapologetically present. And anyone who can't handle your presence was never meant to have access to your love.